Hello, everyone. I am beyond thrilled that you've taken the time to come hang out at home with me, Isha Sesay. We have another jam-packed show for you today. I'm going to be speaking to an epidemiologist for her to break down how coronavirus is spreading through Africa. I'm also going to be speaking to one of the coolest photographers around. Joshua Kesey will be with me. He's going to talk to me about how he's holding on to he's drawing inspiration from during these difficult times. But most important of all is your voice. So throughout the show, please send me your thoughts, your comments. You just message me, and I'm going to try and get to as many of them as I can during the show. Welcome home, everyone. Let's dig in. Now, you may remember if you were here yesterday, and you should have been here yesterday, but anyway, you may remember yesterday I had on someone from WHO Africa, Dr. Michelle Yao, and I asked him about the number of countries in Africa that were yet to report a coronavirus case. It was a very short list. On that list, though, was my home country of Sierra Leone. The situation, sadly, some 24 hours later from when we're broadcasting now, seems to have changed. I want to take you right to Freetown, the capital of Sierra Leone, where we find journalist Umaro Fofana. Umaro, can you hear me?
Hi, Aisha. Yes, I can.
Hi, Umaro. Thank you for joining us at such short notice. What can you tell us about this index case in Sierra Leone?
Well, he's a 37-year-old businessman, and he had returned to Sierra Leone from France on the 16th of March. That was the day on which Sierra Leone started automatically quarantining anyone coming in from a country that had recorded up to 50 cases of COVID-19. So he and others were quarantined, and yesterday he showed signs and symptoms almost literally as he was running out on his quarantine period of 14 days.
Omar, your audio has dropped somewhat. I can hear you faintly. So you just hit pause there while we just work on that. But if you're just joining us here at home with Isha Sesay, Omar Fofana is joining us from Sierra Leone's capital, where he's telling us details about Sierra Leone's index case. Sierra Leone has now reported its first case of coronavirus. He's going to join us again shortly. He's telling us it's someone who came from France, working to get more details about his condition now, because I know Umaro has spoken to patient zero, if you will. That, the situation when you're broadcasting, on the continent and in many parts of the world, the audio drops. You just have to bear with us. But the big news I want to bring you is that after speaking to Dr. Michelle Yao from WHO Africa yesterday, who said it was only a handful of countries that did not have a coronavirus case, including my home country of Sierra Leone. Today, I woke up to the news that Sierra Leone is now reporting its first case, working to get Umar Fofana, a journalist, an international journalist of some report, and share what he knew about the situation. I think we've restored contact. Umar, can you hear me?
Hi, Aisha. Yes, please, I can hear you.
It's so weird because I can hear you there, but it's still faint in my ears. Let me ask the team. Can you hear Umaro clearly? All right. Umaro, we're working on it. Stay with us because it's important that we bring our viewers this story, because a number of countries on the continent, of course, reporting coronavirus cases. The number is over 5,000. Let me take a look at these numbers for you.
It's quite up.
Right now, what we're looking at is over 5,000 cases on the continent. If you were with me, who started last week, we were talking about just over 2,000 cases.
Or do you want me to respond without the earpiece on? So just take it out.
Look at how it's jumped since last Thursday when we launched and where we are right now. We launched with just over 2,000 cases, and now today we're talking about over 5,000 cases on the continent. So working on getting Umaro for you.
Sure.
Okay, Umaro, are you with me? Can you hear me?
Hi, Aisha. Yes, please, I can hear you.
Wonderful. You see, patience wins the day. You were telling us before we lost you about Sierra Leone's index case. Just start from the beginning again. What do we know?
Hi, Aisha. Well, actually, it emerged this morning that the last country in West Africa not to have recorded any case, Sierra Leone, eventually had a case to report. And that person is a 37-year-old businessman, a Sierra Leonean businessman, who returned from France on the 16th of March. And that was the day on which Sierra Leone started automatically quarantining anybody traveling into the country from a country that has recorded up to 50 cases. So he was automatically quarantined, and he was just about, you know, more or less serving out the 14-day quarantine when it emerged that he started feeling signs and symptoms. And then he was tested, and the results was positive for COVID-19. So the president, Julius Maada Bio, made that announcement here today in the live broadcast to the nation.
Okay. You have actually spoken to this 37-year-old, the index case for Sierra Leone. What did he tell you about his condition and how he's doing right now?
He said he was fine and he sounded fine, except for the intermittent scratching of his throat while we spoke on the phone. Otherwise, he said he was good. He said it was, in fact, 2 mornings ago, he performed his morning Fajr Muslim prayer, and then he said he started feeling unwell. So he called on the surveillance officers who checked his temperature. His temperature was normal at 35 degrees. And then he said that he was still feeling unwell. And then he felt this huge, more or less suffocation, from his throat, and he felt his chest. So his wife is a medical doctor. He called his wife on the phone, and the wife advised him to be admitted because the signs he had described to her were consistent with COVID-19. He said he drove himself from the quarantine hotel right to the health facility where he currently is being admitted, and he said that he was fine, and that he, besides those signs and symptoms, he was doing okay when I spoke to him.
Okay, so you were glad he's feeling fine, in spite or despite of the signs and symptoms. But I do have to ask you something. You did mention that he drove himself, which is good, given the suspicions that he might have had COVID-19, which have been borne out, and he, from what he's saying, he wasn't being driven by anyone else to infect anyone else. But I do have to ask you what we know about the conditions of his quarantine. How strictly were they enforced? The whole question of, restriction of movement. I mean, what do we know about, Sierra Leone's procedure for quarantining people and its level of effectiveness?
I'm afraid, Aisha, it's not the best of conditions. That is one of the hotels holding up returning travelers, particularly Sierra Leoneans, but also non-Sierra Leoneans. One of the hotels holding them up, interestingly and probably unbelievably, was even running itself as a hotel, checking in guests, even when it had dozens of travelers who were staying there. I went there myself at the time, and the hotel owner.
I just want to repeat what you said in case our viewers missed it. A hotel, let me just repeat that. A hotel that was designated as a quarantine location was still open to the public and taking in business. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Absolutely. And the manager of the hotel himself admitted to me, even though he hurriedly tried to say that he had only 4 guests who had checked in at the time. But clearly, there were soldiers around the hotel and there were police officers trying to enforce the quarantine. But for some reason, he said they had 4 guests who had checked in, not as travelers who were undergoing any quarantine. And in the first couple of days since the automatic quarantining started, there was absolute chaos in those hotels around the airport, which had been designated for travelers, to be admitted to more or less be put up in. And a lot of them complained about appalling conditions. And there were videos that even emerged of these quarantined travelers meeting and chatting to each other, saying that they were fine, which clearly, from the protocols and the signs and symptoms and all of that, was a risk, because it meant that if any one of them was infected, the chances were that they could probably infect the other person. So they were not strict at all. It's improved in the last few days, but the first 1 week of the quarantining was really very chaotic. And the first batch of those travelers got discharged on Saturday. They were released from the hotel. And now this gentleman who's tested positive was supposed to have been discharged, in fact, today. So the government has announced that all those who were in quarantine with him will be automatically tested for the COVID-19 disease. What obtains up to this period is that one has to meet the case definition to show the signs and symptoms of COVID-19 before they would be tested. But now they say all those who are staying in the hotel with him, whether or not they meet the case definition, they will be automatically tested for COVID-19.
Wow. Omar, we have to leave it there, sadly. We're going to get you back on the show because I do want to ask about the extensiveness of testing there in Sierra Leone. My family's in Sierra Leone, my brother, my cousins, I have a lot of family there. So I kind of know the answer, that there isn't a great deal of widespread testing. But Omar, we'll keep this conversation going in the days ahead. Thank you for joining us here. Thank you for coming to spend time with me here at home. We'll get you on in the days ahead. Thank you. Please stay safe.
Thank you. Cheers.
Cheers. So I just want to reiterate what we're learning about Sierra Leone's index case. If you're just joining us, that it was Umaro Fofana, a fantastic journalist that I've known for many years, talking about this 37-year-old Sierra Leonean who came back from France. He had been in quarantine, was due to be released today, I believe he said, and he started feeling unwell a couple of days ago, 2 mornings ago, as he performed morning prayers, checked his temperature, that was normal, but felt this tightening in his chest, drove himself to the hospital, tested for COVID-19, that test came back positive. I think the most disturbing thing that I got from that conversation, and please share your thoughts, share your comments, was what Umaro shared about what was happening in these quarantine sites, if you will. He talks about a hotel that had been designated as a place to quarantine travelers who were returning from countries that were known to have significant numbers of COVID-19 cases. And he's saying that in the case of one hotel where he spoke to the owner, Umaro is saying that they were open to the public, that those who were supposed to be in quarantine were socializing, and that the first batch of travelers have actually left the hotel and left, I think he said, on Saturday. So now the scramble is on. I would imagine it's a scramble to find travelers and retest them again. This is how things go wrong. This is how things go wrong. If you have quarantine staff that are not following the strictest protocol, then one could argue, what's the point? So, again, working to get on Sierra Leonean officials in the days ahead to get their side of things. Umaro describes that first week of quarantine there in Sierra Leone as chaotic, saying conditions in some of these spots were appalling. Now we have this index. Now we have this index case, and now Sierra Leone is off that list. It was the last country in West Africa that did not have any registered cases of coronavirus, and sadly, my home country. So I want you to understand this is personal to me. My home country is no longer on that list. They're now reporting their first index case and now trying to figure out whether other people they left, the other people who had been released from a quarantine facility, whether they're actually carriers of COVID-19. We're going to stay on top of that story, as you'd imagine, and bring you more details as we get them. I've got to move on. As coronavirus engulfs the world, because I don't really think there's another word to use other than engulfs, we're all desperately looking for a way out of this crisis. Obviously, there's been a lot of talk about vaccines, right? We've heard much conversation about vaccines, but the consensus amongst most doctors, most scientists, is that a vaccine is at the minimum 12 months away, 12 to 18 months away. So it is not going to be the answer right now for this crisis that we find ourselves in. With that being out of reach, because that's effectively what it is, more and more people are looking to innovation. More and more people are looking to the innovators of this world to see how they can support public health experts, what they can do to help us solve a number of the problems that are emerging in this coronavirus response. I am so pleased to say that joining me now is an innovator. She's here to join us and tell us more about some of these efforts and the work she's doing. Dr. Funmi Adewara is the CEO and founder of Moby Health International. She joins me now from Salisbury, England. Dr. Adewara, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Aisha. Thank you so much for inviting me over to this program.
Thank you. Thank you for taking the time to spend with me and with my viewers as we try and make sense of this situation. Your company is helping in the fight against COVID-19. Can you share with us what you're doing? Can you share with us what you've developed so far?
So Moby Health International is an integrated telemedicine startup company, and our focus is Africa to try and break the gap in the healthcare deficits that you already know about. So we've created an app that enables a patient in Africa to be able to do a consultation with a doctor remotely, and particularly from the Western countries. So that was the plan until COVID-19. And when COVID-19 came about, then it became a very easy tool for people in Africa to be able to consult with a doctor. Because with the lockdown, then it has become a very big problem for people to be able to access consultation. People are nervous, people are anxious, and those who don't even have COVID-19 symptoms run a risk of contracting it if they go to the hospital. In Italy, it's been shown that more than 19% of cases were actually contracted through the hospitals. So it is very good medium to try and curtail the spread of the virus. So telemedicine essentially means the use of modern day technology to provide clinical care to patients remotely. So we have developed an online screening tool that will help patients to their symptoms, then have a free teleconsultation with a doctor.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for the work that you're doing. Now more than ever, it's needed. I do have to ask you, though, about your ability to scale such a technology in Africa, given, as you know, you and I both know, some of the internet bandwidth issues, the limitations with access. I mean, talk to me about how you get this out to as many people as possible, particularly the poor who may be locked out of the formally out of the healthcare system because they don't have money in certain places.
Clearly. So as you know, Aisha, there's one of the critical barriers to access in Africa is the shortage of doctors. So Africa bears 25% of the global disease burden, but is serviced by only 2% of world doctors. So our platform is built to be able to target primary care by mobilizing doctors from the Western countries to Africa. Brain drain is a very, very common phenomenon. And you know that majority of doctors from Africa seek greener pastures in the West. And this is why I founded Moby Health, because with technology, we can then mobilize these doctors and other doctors around the world to be able to provide consultation to patients in Africa. Our platform is highly scalable. It has an electronic medical record and a video software, but there's still a big gap with digital infrastructure and commercial hurdles and regulatory hurdles are still things that we are having to deal with because there's no blueprint for the adoption of telemedicine across many African countries. But there's a scope for telemedicine, and right now we are helping to screen patients. So we can do virtual screening, we can do remote monitoring of patients that are in isolation or in quarantine. We can also help with management of these patients. We generate prescription. This can get delivered to their houses. And right now people are talking about self-testing at home because the less people go out, the better for them. So you don't get to spread the infection on your way to the test centers.
Okay, you mentioned you mentioned that it's in use. Where are you working right now? Where is it in use on the continent?
So we launched first in Nigeria, and we are currently incorporating in other African countries, in Ghana, in Rwanda. We're going to be incorporating in Egypt and the rest of them. And then we hope to be in other African countries within more than half of the African countries by 2024. That was the initial plan. But with COVID-19, we've made this app applicable to anybody, anywhere in the world. So we can offer teleconsultation right now.
It's free.
It's free. The teleconsultation and the online screening is free.
Okay. How important is it to your mind as a scientist, as an innovator? How important is it to have Africans at the table as part of this search for innovative solutions to solve global problems, to solve African problems. What does that mean when you have Africans at the table?
Well, it is very important, because somebody like myself, I trained in Nigeria, so that afforded me the first-hand experience of what it looks like for an ordinary person to be able to access basic healthcare. We're talking of rural areas where there are no doctors. People have to travel miles before they can get access to a doctor. So it is very crucial that we Africans are part of the solution finders, and we have fantastic innovators across the continent. We have more than 25,000 apps being developed across the continent. You have medication dispensers, you have low-cost point of care testing tools are being developed. But again, access to capital can be a bit of a challenge, and that is one of the problems for most African entrepreneurs. For Mobi Health, we have developed a solution that is not targeted just for the rich. So we've developed a solution for the poor, for those at the fringe of the society, by creating these telehealth clinics, which are mobile clinics that can be deployed. They're low cost, they're solar powered, and they're SATCOM equipped, and can be deployed to the rural communities. And we're working with a telecom giant that can make this accessible to millions of people across Africa. And so this is the way to break the gap and making sure that everybody is covered.
Well, Dr. Funmi Adewara, I thank you and every innovator who is intervening right now, who's creating these interventions to help in the response not just in Africa, but across the world. We thank you for your work, and thank you for telling us about your app. We're grateful to you. Please stay safe there in Salisbury, England. We appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you, Aisha.
Thank you. We are going to, as the weeks go on, spotlight lots of innovators and lots of these interventions that are being used on the continent. We want to showcase the fact that Africans are part of the search for solutions, have created solutions. I think it was so critical what she said, that they are looking to bridge the gap between the rich and the poor, so that those left on the margins, those who have problems with access, can actually get the help that they need. And at a time like this, with this kind of disease, this kind of virus that does not discriminate, that is everywhere, whether you're rich or poor, doesn't matter how you pray, which country you're in, everyone is at risk. So I want to thank Dr. Funmi Adewara for joining us. I want to hear what you are thinking and saying. Let's go to some of your comments here. This one from Patrick Isaac Bayo. He's saying, great. Thank you. The levy work hard, but the government does not employ additional protective measures to help the doctors keep high hygiene practices and the patients from being infected by the doctors. This question about what happens when people go to hospitals is a critical one. And doctors on the continent, whether they have sufficient PPEs, personal protective equipment, that is a major part of this story that we are following closely. Getting this message, a shout out from TV7. Wow, so long watching. Thank you for joining us. Someone said to me, the network is epileptic, Aisha. We're going to work on that. This is always a challenge. Of course, we are broadcasting. I'm broadcasting from home. We're pushing home internet to the very limits. Plus, remember, everyone is at home now as well. So everybody's on the network. We're going to push through. This one from the levy as well. People are dying of secondary hospital infections. Coronavirus is one thing, but the fatality rate, it's half because of poor hygiene practices by the healthcare workers. Lots of people joining. Someone asking about the cure. There is no cure for this right now. What we're hoping for is a vaccine, but like I said, that's 12 to 18 months away, and therapeutics. By therapeutics, I mean medication that will ease the symptoms and make people feel better, but that is not a cure. It is just a therapeutic response, something just to kind of, again, lift the worst of this. Right now, we're a long way from a cure. Someone said the voice visual lag is enormous. You need to improve on that. Thank you. Listen, I'm going to read these comments out, whether they're good or they're bad, because I think the feedback is important and we're all part of the conversation. So I shared that with the production team that apparently we're having some issues with lag between audio and visual. We are working on it for you. But maybe close your eyes and just maybe listen to me. Pretend it's radio. No, but seriously, thank you for tuning in and thank you for continuing to send those comments. I'm going to continue to read them as we go on with the show. Let's move on now. Listen, for all that we know about the coronavirus, there's still a significant number of questions that remain unanswered. You know that. The questions seem to mount by the day. When it comes to the spread of the coronavirus in Africa, well, yeah, there's still many, many questions that I have, that I know you have. And so I am so grateful to my next guest that she took time out to see us here, to spend time with us here. Dr. Nelly Yatish is an epidemiologist, as well as a public health expert. She has done extensive work on HIV/AIDS, and she's joining us there from Nairobi, Kenya. She's joining us from Nairobi, as I said. We are, there'll be a little bit of a lag, so bear with us. But Dr. Yatish, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. I'm so grateful to you. Let me start by asking you, what stands out for you as you look at the spread of coronavirus on the continent? We're now above 5,000 cases. What stands out for you?
The most striking thing what stands out for me is that looking at the numbers for Africa, if you look at the numbers for Europe up until, like if you follow from the first day that cases were reported in Europe to the first day that cases were reported in the African continent. And if you follow those cases closely, day by day, you'll find that right now, for example, in Kenya, we're in day 18, and we've already surpassed what was reported in Europe at day 18. And countries like South Africa have bypassed it by far by day 18. So what strikes out is, considering that we are at the lag phase for this, for coronavirus, COVID-19, what will be our situation in Africa 4 to 5 weeks from now? You know, like if you look at the trajectory for Europe, the numbers started going up at week 5, week 6. And for us, our numbers are already surpassing Europe by week 2. So, okay, so it's worrying.
I want to just reiterate what you said. I want to make sure that I got it correctly. You're saying that by day 18, when you put Africa and Europe side by side, when you look at a country like South Africa, that and other countries on the continent, that we are ahead in terms of caseload, if you make a direct comparison to Europe, and that you're saying that even by if you look week to week, even though the numbers are low, which is what people keep talking about, you're saying even though the numbers are low, so people keep saying this thing is not spreading, you're saying when you look at the data, it's actually moving faster.
It's moving faster than it did in Europe.
Wow. What does the modeling say right now? As you've looked at some of the modeling, what does it say about the potential for loss of life on the continent? What are you seeing?
Okay, so there are different, considering we don't have a lot of data on mortality right now in Africa, and the dynamics are quite different. First of all, we have a relatively young population. Mm-hmm. If you compare Africa, a country like Kenya, for example, we have only slightly over 3% of the population above 65, compared to 23% that they have in Italy, for example, or more than 16% in the US. So we have the dynamics are quite different. Our population is relatively younger, but then at the same time we have more diseases. We have malnutrition, we have anemia, HIV, TB. you know. So it's when you talk about the modeling, what we're doing right now is modeling based on what we are seeing in other countries, but the dynamics could be very different if you take into account those things that I've just mentioned, and also population density in some areas. For example, we have so many informal settlements, and the population density in those settlements is quite high compared to what you've seen in Europe or China or in America. So the dynamics are very different. Um, we are hopeful that the strategies that are being put in place, because we are responding faster than they did in Europe or even in America, the measures that we've put in place for social distancing to contain the spread, we're doing it faster than they did in Europe and America. We are hoping that with these strategies in place, our case fatality rate will be lower.
And what can you
But
tell me? Go ahead. Sorry, Dr. Yatish.
sorry, go ahead. So from the modeling, I do not think we are going to get to what we see in Europe, but it's going to be higher than what we are seeing, the average of 1%, because of the healthcare system also. You know, our healthcare system is already stretched thin from all these other diseases.
Wow. So it's moving faster, though we have a relatively young population. That doesn't save us, because at the end of the day, there's so many other underlying conditions. Dr. Yatish, you've given us a lot to think about. I'm grateful for you. I hope you'll come back, because I have many more questions to put to you. I know that you're gathering the data and you're looking at it.
Yes.
So please know that you're always welcome here at Home with Isha Sesay, and we'd love to talk to you in the coming days. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay, so that was the first epidemiologist that I've been able to speak to who is focusing on Africa. And I'm so grateful that she did, because I don't know about you, but she gave me a completely different perspective on this disease and its spread through Africa. We've all been laboring under this false idea that the thing is not spreading on the continent, or spreading slower, more slowly than in other parts of the world. But according to Dr. Yatish, who is an epidemiologist joining us there from Nairobi, Kenya, when you look at the numbers, when you put it side by side, Africa and Europe, for where they were at this point in the crisis, we have more cases. So it is moving, and it's moving fast. The other point she made, even though we've all been talking about younger populations, that is not going to save us. It is not the safety net, because there's so many underlying conditions that we're dealing with on the continent. So I want you to think on that. Share your thoughts, share your comments. Meanwhile, while you do, and while you get your thumbs ready to send me your comments, let me get some headlines for you, because there are a couple of headlines from around the continent that I want to share with you. This one that you may remember that yesterday on the show, we told you about the situation in Kenya. You may remember that we told you about the heavy-handed tactics used by security forces as they work to enforce this curfew, this dusk till dawn curfew in the country. We showed you videos of, civilians, people. We showed you that video of that man who was crying. There's been talk about people being beaten and tear gas being used on crowds who are out beyond the curfew, which is 7 p.m. local time. Now we're getting word of more violence, this time involving a 13-year-old boy. You heard me right, a 13-year-old boy who, as reported by the BBC, was playing in the balcony of his parents' house when a police officer fired 5 shots to disperse people. This boy was struck in the stomach. He later died in hospital. The police chief has ordered an investigation, but very troubling indeed, that situation in Kenya. More reports of violence, and we're looking to our leaders, we're looking to the judiciary to rein the security forces in. We understand this is a serious situation and people have to follow the restrictive measures, but we're also asking for our authorities, for our leaders to step in. A 13-year-old boy killed in Kenya. the police chief now ordering an investigation. I want to bring you another story, another update. If you were with us yesterday, you remember I told you about South Africa. There too, more scenes of violence. Again, security forces and enforcing their 21-day lockdown, which began last Friday. Again, heavy accusations of heavy-handed tactics. Not even accusations. There's video of people being dispersed and all the rest of it, harshly, aggressively. I told you about the man who was shot dead. In fact, we had Reedy Clubby on the show who joined us from Johannesburg. She gave some more details about that man who was shot. He was on his balcony, his family's balcony, when he was shot there in South Africa. According to the BBC, they're reporting now a police officer and a security guard have been accused of this killing. They faced murder and police brutality charges. They appeared in court in South Africa on this Tuesday. Another update to bring you from DRC. We had Thomas Nybo on the show last week. He joined us from Goma in the east of DRC, where he said it was business as usual. We know on the other side of the country, in DRC, in Kinshasa, rather, the capital, there had been talk of putting in a lockdown. That lockdown was supposed to have started last Saturday. It was postponed. The reason? Because they say there's been a massive price hikes by shops and vendors as people scramble to stock up before that lockdown. The country has, of course, taken measures to slow down the virus, but Kinshasa, the capital, had wanted to put this lockdown in place. That has not happened yet. It's supposed to be a 3-week lockdown. We'll see when it actually goes into effect, and we'll bring you those details. And finally, I want to tell you about the situation in Liberia, which neighbors Sierra Leone, my home country, Liberia there in West Africa. Riot police being sent out in that country to try and restore some kind of calm. This happened on Monday as thousands of angry roadside sellers took to the streets, unhappy that their stores had been destroyed overnight. They took to the streets and they basically were chanting that effectively, if they can trade, the shops should close as well. This is one of the big moves by the Liberian government, this destruction of stalls in the hope that it will stop people congregating. That will in itself, they hope, stop the spread of COVID-19. 3-week medical emergency declaration in that country. In case you're wondering about numbers in Liberia, they currently have 3 confirmed cases. So that was a quick roundup from the continent, some of the big headlines that I wanted to bring you. I want to hear from you now. Let me see if I can get some of your comments up, see what you are saying, apart from telling me that there's a lag, which, again, it is absolutely appreciated. All your comments are appreciated. Let me see what you are saying. I'm scrolling. Yes, someone made a very good point that I do want to add. LLWS88, thank you. As I talked about Dr. Yatish and what she said about the spread of the virus in Africa being ahead of Europe, thank you, LLWS88. She did say also, and it is worth reiterating, that African countries have moved faster to lock down their countries, to respond and restrict movement, and we have taken faster action than Europe and America. So thank you for making me reiterate that. I appreciate that. That's a very important point to make. Sarah Princess says there's no justification for the violence. I absolutely agree. We don't want to be getting these comments about violence in Kenya, in South Africa, anywhere that people are taking to the streets, in Liberia. That's not what we want to see. We are all in this together. We are a community, regardless whether you're in the north, the south, the east, the west of the continent. We have to pull together. Security forces are there to protect us. They are there to make sure these rules are applied, but we don't want to see these clashes. We don't want to see this violence. I agree. There is no justification for any violence. I couldn't agree more with Sarah Princess. Tyler Hightower 11. Our doctors are concerned about protective gear in this coronavirus fight. Health workers are seeing ripple effect. Absolutely. That's absolutely true. Our African doctors are indeed worried about PPEs, personal protective equipment. We've seen what that has done here in the United States. The absence of it has led to healthcare workers taking ill, and we don't want to see that. We don't have enough doctors to be in that kind of situation. Doctors everywhere, doctors, nurses, they're all precious, regardless of the part of the world. And we especially want to make sure that in Africa, they too get the protection they need. Thank you for those comments. Please keep them coming in. It is a key part of the show, hearing from you, hearing what you think. It's not just about my voice. This is a community. It's the home community. So please keep those thoughts, those comments, those questions coming. Okay. As we give you a lot to think about on the show every day, it's also important that we leave you with hope, inspiration, because at the end of the day, we're going to need that to pull through these dark times, and this too shall pass. It's difficult right now, and we're hoping there's a minimum loss of life. And we're holding on to the fact that we know that this will end eventually. We don't know when, but it will end, and we'll get through this. So we make sure that on this show, Home with Isha Sesay, every day we bring you a bright side. We bring you something that you can hold on to and think about that will put a smile on your face. Today's bright light is one of the hottest photographers around. He has been on several lists of one of the 30 under 30, Inc. magazine, Fast Company. His work has been celebrated. Let me welcome Joshua Kisi, who joins us now from New York. He's originally from Ghana, but he's in New York, and he's using his images to tell important stories. I'm so glad he's here. Joshua, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. How's it going?
Oh, Joshua, I don't know. It's going. I mean, these are crazy times, right? We're
Very
all
much
processing
so.
information all the time.
Very much so. I'm just grateful to be here, grateful for the opportunity to begin to galvanize and inspire people to think around storytelling, to think around post-corona, post-COVID-19, what type of story do we want to tell? What type of society do we want to be? Because this is a big refresh moment for the world globally, and especially the continent.
Yeah, no doubt. I think that's absolutely true. It's a time for us to reflect and to pull together. I mean, talk to me first of all. I need to ask you the first question, as I ask all our viewers, so all our guests who have roots on the continent. How's your family doing? How are your friends on the continent?
My family's doing okay. Of course, I have a lot of elderly family in parts of Ghana, in particular, in the eastern region. But most of my family's doing okay. Everybody's taking it easy. Everybody's staying at home, trying their best. My friends, who are also artists, are also doing great. They're just, trying to find ways to galvanize communities, stay connected, but as well as stay aware of the information abreast right now. So I believe the president called for, full-on quarantine and lockdown of Accra and a lot of the neighboring cities in the country. So everybody's kind of figuring out what that means. And it produces larger issues because when it comes to food, when it comes to a lot of the amenities that a lot of the middle and upper class has in Ghana, it lends open to a lot of the consistent issues that we've had when it comes to who's exactly is food secure and what does that mean for the rest of the country. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I watched President Akufo-Addo's address on Friday. I watched it live, the joys of technology, and saw him put that lockdown in place for Greater Accra, Kumasi, and Tema, some of the contiguous areas around those big cities. How are you doing personally? I know you're in New York,
I'm in
but
New York.
Of course, it's home, and so our hearts are there. And our thoughts are there. How are you coping with this all?
I'm coping in the best way I know how, and that's to continue to march forward and think positively about what's happening in the best way I can. I think as humans, we don't really feel the impact until it's 1 degree of separation away. In the hospital that's actually the neighboring hospital here, last week they had 13 deaths at Elmer's Hospital here in Queens. So it's one of Yeah, pretty much the epicenter. So pretty much here and trying to keep a stable mind and as well as a positive outlook on everything, but as well as being very careful and as well as doing the best that me and my wife could do as a family unit to stay home. And the privilege we have to stay home and also work is something we recognize, and we definitely are grateful for. So, you know, the best way I think about it is like in these situations, this is the best time to kind of sow your seeds. And that was kind of my next kind of venture and chapter into what storytelling and creativity could do in this time when there's so much despair, when there's so much distress, when there's so much, you know, unfortunate news around. How do we find a light in that?
Yeah. So what are you turning to in terms of, I know, art or, you know, so music, books, TV? Where are you turning, or, you know, or spiritual writings? What are you turning to for the light right now?
I think the light happens in variations, depending on who you are, where you're at in life. But for me personally, a lot of it comes through community. You know, connected with friends and family. Of course, I love art. I love photography. I love documentaries. I love praying and meditating and finding stillness within all of this. But at the same time, it's really the human connection that inspires me. So hearing somebody else's story, whether a challenging story or a good story or indifferent, I try to find the kind of the connection between human beings in this time to be a beautiful one and to be inspiring, because at the end of the day, all we have is our stories, you know, the material possessions, the, you know, the social statuses we hold in life. At the end of the day, all we have is, you know, our identities, our stories, our cultures, kind of what we understood to kind of place us on this earth, and as well as connect us to each other, is really our own distinct DNA. Your story is not like mine, and my story is not like his or hers or theirs. So there's a lot of room and kind of creativity to just be able to hearken on that. So last week, I came up with this idea to be like, hey, like similar to what you're doing here, bringing the issues, the challenges that the creative field is facing right now, because a lot of people don't have guaranteed jobs or guaranteed employment. They're contract by contract, they're project by project. So as of last week, I was like, hey, let me just speak to a couple of my friends on Instagram Live and get the temperature pulse on what they're doing and how they're staying focused. And that platform and initiative turned into a whole company in itself. It's called Our Stories, and it's pretty much highlighting the creative journey, the ups, downs, and kind of, you know, different challenges you go through as a creative person, whether you're a photographer or graphic designer or a writer or athlete or however you. I think it was a perfect time to kind of highlight the stories that make us us, and your story being distinctive. And it's been a platform that's, you know, it's growing week to week. So we're just really grateful to continue to have these discussions, and as well as bring out the positive light out of right now, when you should be sowing in your seeds and knowing that, you know, this too shall pass.
Yeah, no, I think that's amazing. I do want to ask you about how you, because I'm sure using the platform, using tech, it is pretty global. But you know, I do wonder whether you have a message of uplift, of kind of inspiration for folks on the continent right now who are watching us.
Absolutely, I think it's important to build community in the best way we know how, and at that, there's a privilege that comes with technology and what that means on a global scale. But I think the best type of communication and technology is the person-to-person interaction. So kind of connected with somebody that, you know, is also going through something, but is also wanting to do something to be proactive. Like, hey, how can we galvanize community in a time like this? Even though we can't necessarily be in the same rooms, what does that mean for what we create, how we create, and how we view the rest of the world? So I would tell people to continue to don't go into these silos of aloneness, like continue to kind of reach out, and people kind of reach out as well. So it's this mutual connection that can happen where a painter and a graphic designer could meet, but also an engineer can meet, and they could build the next platform and change the face of Africa as we know it when it comes to art, creative history, and narratives. That's just an example, but I think there's just needs to be a mixing of different people, different types of titles, different types of career paths, and just kind of like academia needs to meet the creative scene, but as well as needs to meet the political scene, but the political scene still needs to meet, like all these different parties need to kind of come together in the best way and think about what solutions look best for a very diverse continent, a very diverse group of people, and what can we do with what we have right now.
I think that that's so well put. You know, you were future looking there with that answer and talking about others. So I'm going to draw it back and ask
Absolutely.
you how you plan to do better when this is all over, right? What, you know, as a person, as an artist, what, because I do think that we should use this moment, as difficult as it is. And, you know, it's hard to be projecting forward when, you know, we just don't quite know what's going to happen, but being optimistic and hopeful,
Yes.
we allow ourselves to look forward, right? So one of the things that I'm trying to do now is ask myself, how will I be a better person when this is all over? What will I do better? Because I think we should also take this opportunity to retool ourselves. So for you, I don't know if you've started having any of those like internal conversations or conversations with your wife.
No, absolutely. I think in general, I'm trying to be a better version of myself every day. So the little things that we normally ignore or have distractions of because of the conveniences of life, now we get the opportunity to actually tackle those things. So whether it's, you know, in your character or your mindset or your understanding, but as well as something playful, you can learn how to cook a new dish. You can learn how to, you know, speak and read a new language. I think this is an opportunity to look at fruitfulness in a different way, and not in a way that's like, you know, my life is bogged down to the 40 hours that I need to work. But it's like, in those 40 hours, how are we finding purpose in what we're doing? And how is that extending beyond ourselves? Because I always believe if the idea starts and ends with yourself, it's not big enough. So thinking beyond yourself, like, what can I actually start? And what in the dialogues that I could kind of create. For me personally, that's with platforms like Our Stories. And now it's only supposed to be a 2-day thing. And now it's its own company. We have 5 people working it. Social media managers, copy editors, transcribers, graphic designers. And I just put out a tweet. I was just like, I know this is a time of distress right now, but let's look at it as an opportunity to do something greater, and galvanize everybody to think that way and be inspired by stories in general.
Joshua, so good to speak to you. I am inspired. I think this is my outward move to kind of like extend beyond myself in terms of personal. I guess you want us selfish acts of learning. I'm going to learn how to eat with chopsticks. That's what I'm going to do.
I don't know how to eat with chopsticks as well, so I will join you on that journey of learning how to eat with chopsticks because I'm terrible.
There we go. My mom says because I'm left-handed. The left-handed people can't do anything elegant. Joshua Kesey, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Stay safe, be well, and we'll continue to check in with you. Stay safe and love to the family and friends.
Likewise. Thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it, and love to everybody around the world, especially on the continent of Africa. I hope people are enjoying, but as well as finding this time to be inspired and looking to show love to each other. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Take care. Speak soon. Bye. I loved what Joshua said there, that this is a time for us to build community. This is not a time for us to retreat into silos, that we have to come together and lift each other up. This too shall pass. It is difficult. It's difficult for all of us. It's difficult if you're an African in the diaspora. It's difficult if you're on the continent. It's difficult globally. This is not about being African or European or American. This is a difficult time for humanity. We can all come together in our various communities, and we can all come together with purpose. And I just love what Joshua was saying there, that you can come together and small things can become big things, like his platform for Our Stories. I hope you've enjoyed today's show. There was so much that we got through, so many things that I'm going to think on, whether it's what the situation is when it comes to a country like my home, Sierra Leone, which is just recorded first index case, and what that means when you look at the additional details around quarantining there and how in that first week it was chaotic, or whether you look at what the epidemiologist said to us, Dr. Yatish, that this disease is moving faster in Africa, though our lead